You think it's stress. It isn't. It's what you keep ignoring, and it's getting louder. There was a man in the days of kings who felt the weight every night. Tight chest, restless mind, no peace. He called it pressure, work, responsibility, but it wasn't. It was misalignment he refused to face. Every decision he made pulled him one way. Every truth he knew pulled him another. And that tension didn't stay quiet. It became his life. You're not overwhelmed, you're divided. There was a woman who prayed for rest. She asked for calm, for relief, for clarity. But every day, she chose what disturbed her. Same thoughts, same habits, same compromises. And then she asked why she felt exhausted. Because you can't live in contradiction and feel peace. Let's make this clear. Stress is not always pressure. Sometimes it's signal. There was a servant who felt constant tension. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet weight that never left. He ignored it, called it normal, pushed through it, but that weight was not random. It was warning, because he kept stepping into things he knew were wrong, and his spirit refused to agree. You're not just tired, you're resisting what you already know. There was a man who made decisions that looked right, logical, acceptable, even successful. But inside, something felt off, consistently, and he silenced it, again and again, until that quiet signal became loud pressure, because what you ignore in truth returns as tension. Tough. Here's the truth. Your body reacts to what your mind avoids. Tough. There was a woman who kept saying, "I'm just stressed," but her life was full of things she knew didn't belong. Connections, choices, patterns she refused to release. And that stress never left, because it wasn't stress. It was misalignment she was maintaining. You're not burned out. You're carrying what you shouldn't. There was a prophet who felt heaviness before every step he wasn't meant to take. Not after, before. That's how it works. The signal comes early, but most people ignore early discomfort and wait for visible damage. Let's go deeper. Some of you don't have a stress problem. You have an honesty problem. There was a man who kept asking for clarity, but every time clarity came, he adjusted it, reframed it, made it easier to accept. And then he said, "I'm confused." He wasn't confused. He was unwilling. You're not lost. You're avoiding the direction you already see. There was a woman who kept going back to what drained her, not because she didn't know, because she didn't want to let go. And every return added weight, until even small things felt heavy, because nothing else changed. This isn't happening to you. You're maintaining it. You think it's stress. It's not. It's misalignment you keep choosing. Fix the source. Or keep managing the symptom. That's the choice. You keep trying to manage the feeling. But the feeling isn't the problem. It's the message. And you keep silencing it. There was a man in the days of judges who woke up tired no matter how much he rested. His body was still. His mind was not. He called it fatigue, but it wasn't fatigue. It was conflict. Every day he moved in one direction. Every night he knew it was wrong, and that gap never let him rest. You don't lose peace randomly. You lose it when your actions and your truth stop agreeing. There was a woman who kept herself busy from morning to night, always moving, always doing, because stillness made it worse. The moment she stopped, the weight returned, thoughts she avoided, decisions she delayed, things she knew she had to face. So she stayed busy and called it productivity. But activity doesn't remove tension, it hides it. Let's make this sharp. Distraction is not relief, it's delay. There was a servant who laughed in public, strong, composed, in control, but in quiet moments, he felt it, that same pressure, that same unease, and he tried to push it down, ignore it, outrun it, but you can't outrun what you carry. Listen carefully. You're not stressed because life is heavy. You're stressed because you're carrying what doesn't belong to you. 200 years. There was a man who kept saying, "I'll deal with it later." Later never came. Only more weight, more tension, more pressure. Because what you postpone, you multiply. 2. Here's the truth. Unresolved things don't stay still. They grow. Tupperty, there was a woman who ignored a small discomfort. Something didn't feel right, but she minimized it. It's nothing, until it wasn't small anymore, until it affected everything. Because early signals are quiet, late consequences are loud. Tupperlige, you don't suddenly feel overwhelmed. You become overwhelmed through accumulation. There was a prophet who stopped at the first sign, not the last, the first. And because he acted early, the weight never grew. That's the difference. Early response or late burden. You think you need rest. You don't. You need resolution. This isn't happening to you. You're delaying it. Face what you've been avoiding, or keep carrying what's been building. That's the outcome. You think the pressure is coming from outside. It isn't. It's coming from inside, where you keep saying yes to what you know is wrong. That's the tension. There was a man in the days of kings who felt it every morning before he even spoke. A weight he couldn't explain. Nothing around him looked broken. Everything worked, everything functioned, but inside there was resistance, because every day he agreed to things he didn't believe in, and every agreement cost him something: clarity, strength, peace, until even simple decisions felt heavy. You don't lose energy by doing too much. You lose it by doing what's not aligned. There was a woman who kept pushing forward, always trying, always striving, but nothing felt right, because she was moving fast, in the wrong direction. And speed doesn't fix misalignment, it amplifies it. Let's make this clear. The faster you go in the wrong direction, the heavier it feels. There was a servant who said yes to everything. Opportunities, requests, expectations, but he never asked if he should, only if he could. And over time, his life filled with things that didn't belong to him, and he called it stress. But it wasn't stress. It was overload from lack of discernment. Not everything that comes to you is meant for you. There was a man who kept choosing what looked right instead of what felt right. Logical, safe, acceptable. And he ignored the quiet resistance inside him until that resistance became constant pressure. Because truth doesn't disappear when you ignore it, it pushes back. Here's the truth. Inner resistance is not weakness, it's warning. There was a woman who kept overriding her own clarity. Every time she felt something was off, she explained it away, adjusted it, minimized it. And every time she did, the pressure grew, because what you override internally, you carry externally. You're not overwhelmed by life, you're overwhelmed by contradiction. There was a prophet who refused to move until his direction was clear, not externally, internally. And because of that, he moved less, but with no resistance. No weight, no confusion. That's alignment, not speed, not volume, clarity. This isn't happening to you. You're creating it. Stop agreeing to what drains you, or keep calling it stress. That's the choice. You think it's pressure building around you. It isn't. It's pressure building inside you, from everything you keep holding that was never meant to stay. That's why it doesn't leave. There was a man in the days of the wilderness who carried more than he was told to carry. Not out of rebellion, out of fear. He gathered extra, held on to what he thought he might need later, kept what should have been released, and at first it felt wise, prepared, secure. But over time, what he held on to began to spoil, rot, turn against him, because what is not meant to be kept does not stay neutral. It decays, and when it decays inside your life, it contaminates everything connected to it. You don't just carry things, things carry consequences. There was a woman who kept relationships that had already ended in truth, not physically, emotionally. She revisited them, replayed them, stayed connected to something that had already moved on from her, and she called it love. But it wasn't love. It was attachment refusing to release, and every time she returned to it, she felt heavier, because you cannot move forward while holding on to something that belongs behind you. Let's make this sharper. You are not tired from moving forward. You are tired from holding on to what you should have left. There was a servant who kept responsibilities that were never his to carry. He said yes too often, took on what wasn't assigned, and over time, his life filled with weight that didn't belong to him. And then he asked why he felt overwhelmed. Because burden doesn't come from purpose, it comes from misplacement. Tapler, now listen carefully. Not everything you're holding is yours, and what isn't yours will always feel heavy. There was a man who kept secrets, not dramatic, just enough to stay hidden, things he never faced, never corrected, never released. And over time, those secrets didn't stay contained. They shaped how he spoke, how he decided, how he responded, because what you don't confront, you carry, and what you carry controls you. Here's the truth. Unreleased things don't disappear, they accumulate. There was a woman who ignored a quiet conviction, not once, repeatedly. She felt it every time, and every time she chose to delay, because dealing with it would have cost her something. So she stayed, and the cost grew, because what you delay doesn't stay the same. It multiplies. Tough. You think you're overwhelmed because life is too much. It's not. It's because you're holding too much. There was a prophet who was told to release before moving forward, not after, before, and he obeyed immediately. And because he released early, he never carried unnecessary weight. That's the difference. Release early or carry it later. Some of you are trying to move forward while dragging everything behind you. That's why it feels impossible. You don't need more strength. You need less weight. This isn't happening to you. You're holding on to it. Let go of what you already know doesn't belong, or keep calling it stress. That's the outcome. You think the tension will go away if you push through it. It won't, because the tension isn't something you break through. It's something you're supposed to listen to. There was a man in the days of prophets who forced his way forward. Every step felt heavy, but he kept moving anyway. More effort, more pressure, more control, and the more he pushed, the worse it felt, because he wasn't moving with direction. He was moving against it, and resistance always feels like pressure. You're not supposed to fight every feeling. Some of them are telling you to stop. There was a woman who stayed in something that drained her, not because she didn't see it, because she believed endurance would fix it. So she stayed, waited, tried harder, but endurance does not correct misalignment. It extends it, and the longer she stayed, the more she felt it. That same weight, that same tension, that same quiet truth she refused to accept. Let's make this clear. Staying longer does not make something right. It makes it heavier. There was a servant who kept working in a place that did not fit him. Everything felt forced. Nothing flowed. But he told himself, this is just part of the process. So he ignored the resistance. And over time, what could have been a signal became exhaustion. Because when you ignore direction, your body carries the consequence. Tumtumau. Now listen carefully. Not all resistance means keep going. Some resistance means turn around. Tours. There was a man who kept forcing decisions that never felt clear. He needed them to work. So he pushed them, adjusted them, held onto them. And every time, they collapsed. Because you cannot force alignment. You either move with it or you feel it. Here's the truth. If something consistently drains you, it's not building you, it's taking from you. There was a woman who kept overriding her own clarity. Every time something felt wrong, she stayed anyway. And every time, the tension returned, because clarity ignored becomes pressure. You're not overwhelmed because life is hard. You're overwhelmed because you're fighting truth. Taivi. There was a prophet who refused to move until the weight lifted, not because he was passive, because he understood the difference between effort and alignment. And when he moved, it carried no tension, no resistance, no confusion. That's the difference, force or flow. Some of you are trying to force what you should be leaving, and that's why it feels impossible. You don't need to try harder. You need to stop fighting what you already feel. This isn't happening to you. You're pushing against it. Stop forcing what doesn't align. Or keep calling it stress. That's the choice. You think it's just stress building up. It isn't. It's truth you keep pushing down, trying to come back up. There was a man in the days of kings who felt it rise in him every time he sat alone. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet pressure that wouldn't leave. He filled his days so he wouldn't have to face it. Work, noise, constant movement. And for a while it worked, until it didn't. Because what you suppress doesn't disappear, it waits. And when it comes back, it's stronger. You don't silence truth, you store it. There was a woman who avoided a decision she knew she had to make. Not once, repeatedly. She postponed it, reframed it, made it easier to ignore. And every delay felt small, manageable. But over time, that one decision became the weight she carried everywhere, because what you refuse to decide decides how you feel. Let's make this sharp. Unmade decisions create constant pressure. There was a servant who kept saying, "I'll deal with it later." Later never came. Only more tension, more confusion, more heaviness. Because when something requires resolution, delay is not neutral. It builds. Tough. Now listen carefully. You don't feel overwhelmed because life is unclear. You feel overwhelmed because something is clear and you're not acting on it. There was a man who knew the direction he had to take. It was obvious, undeniable, and still he stayed because moving meant losing something. Comfort, familiarity, security, and he chose to stay. But staying didn't remove the truth. It increased the pressure because clarity without action turns into weight. Here's the truth. Your mind cannot stay at peace when your actions and your truth are separated. There was a woman who kept trying to relax, rest more, slow down. But no matter what she did, the tension stayed. Because rest does not fix misalignment. It only exposes it. You're not tired from doing too much. You're tired from holding what you should have resolved. There was a prophet who acted the moment something became clear. Not after thinking, not after waiting. Immediately. And because of that, he never carried unnecessary weight. Because clarity acted on never becomes pressure. That's the difference. Resolve early or carry it constantly. Toms, some of you are trying to calm what you should confront. That's why it doesn't go away. You don't need more rest. You need resolution. Torf, this isn't happening to you. You're holding it in place. Face what you already know or keep carrying what you refuse to resolve. That's the outcome. You think it's just anxiety. It isn't. It's your life pushing back against what you keep forcing. There was a man in the days of the kings who kept walking a path that looked right to everyone else. Orderly, stable, approved. But inside, something resisted every step. Quietly at first, a slight unease, a hesitation he couldn't explain. And he ignored it. Because everything on the outside made sense, so he kept going. And the further he went, the stronger the resistance became, until even simple decisions felt heavy because he wasn't walking in alignment. He was maintaining an image, and image cannot carry truth. You're not anxious because you're weak. You're anxious because you're out of alignment. After, there was a woman who tried to control everything, every detail, every outcome, because control felt like safety. But the more she tried to control, the more unstable everything felt. Because control does not create peace, it hides fear, and fear never stays hidden. It leaks through tension, through overthinking, through constant pressure. Tarpal, let's make this clear. Anxiety is not always something to manage. Sometimes it's something to understand. There was a servant who kept preparing for things that never happened, always anticipating, always thinking ahead. Because he didn't trust the path he was on, and instead of changing direction, tried to control the uncertainty, and that's where the anxiety lived, not in the future, in his refusal to move. Now, listen carefully. You don't overthink what is clear, you overthink what you're resisting. There was a man who knew what he had to leave, not partially, completely. And every day he delayed, his mind filled with noise, What if? Maybe? Later. And that noise didn't come from confusion. It came from avoidance. Because clarity delayed becomes mental chaos. Here's the truth. Your mind is not the problem. It's reacting to what you won't act on. Calm. There was a woman who kept trying to calm herself. Breathing. Resting. Slowing down. But the moment she returned to the same situation, the feeling came back. Because you can't calm what you keep recreating. You're not overwhelmed by thoughts. You're overwhelmed by contradiction. There was a prophet who refused to move until his direction was settled inside him. And when he moved, there was no noise, no pressure, no confusion, because clarity removes anxiety at the source. That's the difference. Manage symptoms or remove the cause. Tough. Some of you are trying to calm your mind while continuing the same choices. That's why it doesn't work. You don't need more techniques. You need different decisions. Doublers, this isn't happening to you. You're creating it. Stop forcing what doesn't align, or keep calling it anxiety. That's the outcome. You think it's just stress. It isn't. It's the cost of living against what you already know is true. There was a man in the days of the prophets who kept asking for peace. Every night he prayed. Every morning he hoped it would feel different. It didn't, because every day he chose the same direction, the same compromise, the same quiet decision he knew was wrong. And then he asked why peace never stayed. Because peace is not given to contradiction. It follows alignment. You're not overwhelmed by life. You're overwhelmed by what you keep agreeing to. There was a woman who kept saying, "It's just a phase." The tension, the pressure, the constant weight. She believed it would pass, but it didn't. Because it wasn't temporary. It was built, choice by choice, day by day, until it became her normal. Dots make this final. You don't feel this way by accident. You build it. Tofter, there was a servant who tried to manage everything, adjust it, balance it, keep it under control. But no matter how he managed it, the weight stayed. Because management doesn't remove misalignment. It maintains it. To now, listen carefully. You cannot fix a misaligned life with small adjustments. It requires a clear decision. Tarth. There was a man who finally stopped explaining it away, stopped minimizing, stopped delaying, and he faced it fully. What he knew, what he avoided, what he kept calling stress. And in that moment, everything became clear. Not gradually, immediately, because truth does not need time. It needs agreement. Here's the truth. You're not stressed, you're out of alignment, and your life is reacting to it. This isn't happening to you. You're doing it. You're not hiding it. You're becoming it. So here's the line you cannot avoid anymore. Fix the cause or keep managing the consequence. Realign or repeat. That's the outcome.